Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, witches, werewolves and burglars. It's my weekly wrap-up. So, weekly wrap-up time. I have read a silly number of books this week. So, I've been off work this week and I am, fully into my Read What You Own 100-book challenge at the moment. And you may remember I said when I started that challenge that I was aiming to get through it as quickly as possible and would therefore be reading shorter books. So I've definitely done that this week and I'm ploughing through the challenge. So I've finished 17 books this week. I'm up to book 63 in my 100-book challenge. So I'm getting on well with it and definitely still aiming to finish it by the end of January. So I will talk to you in this video about the 17 books I've finished this week. I won't dwell on any of them, not least because a number of them are like books in a series. There's a few series I've been reading. So I won't go into huge amounts of detail on each one, but I will mention each one and also talk to you about what's been on the channel and what's coming up on the channel. But firstly, let's just reflect. So I'm filming this on the 23rd, so just a couple of days away from Christmas. So if you do celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. If you don't celebrate, then hopefully you are at least getting a decent break from work. But yeah, something I'm definitely looking forward to, seeing my family, who I don't really see often enough. So spending a bit of time with the family and spending a bit of time relaxing as well. Anyway, let me get on with the books I've read this week then. I will just do them in the order in which I read them. So the first one then is Tumble by Joe R Lansdale, which is book 5, I think, in the Hap and Leonard series. So I spoke about the 3 books that precede this in the series last week in my wrap-up. I've been really enjoying this series. This one was no exception. This one has a bit more of a thriller vibe to it than a mystery vibe. The previous ones have kind of been, definitely have had a mystery at the heart of them. This one concerns the daughter of Hap's girlfriend, who's kind of has disappeared, and it's about them trying to track her down. But it's got much more of like an action movie vibe to it, particularly in the final third. So lots of fun. Another really solid entry in the Hap and Leonard series. Definitely recommend that series. After that, so you'll remember I'm doing this thing where each book I read is linked in some way to the book I read before. So after this, I read another book by Joe R Lansdale. So I read Drive-In Book 3, The Bus Tour, which was okay. It definitely wasn't as good as the Hap and Leonard book. So the Drive-In series, and this is the final one of those, are a series of kind of bizarro horror books. I did do a review, I think, of the first book on the channel ages and ages ago. So they're kind of bizarro horror books about this Texas drive-in that gets kind of picked up and taken to another world. And it's about what happens, like the kind of weird society that grows up within the drive-in as a result. So this kind of continues that series. And it's kind of darkly comic at times, very gross at times, and quite fun, but not fantastic. After that, another book 3 in a series. So I read book 3 in the Witches series by James Darke. That is The Torture, which has this very saucy cover. There's a bit of reflection on the cover, which is probably a good thing because it's hiding the cover model's modesty. So very cheap, sleazy British horror novels from the 80s about the kind of period of the witch hunts in England, and particularly about a battle between this guy called John Ferris and a guy called Monk, who's a witch finder. So this continues that series. It was fun. I read 2 more books in that series, which I'll come back to. This wasn't my favourite of the 3 that I read this week, but it was entertaining enough. After that, another book 3 in a series. So this was book 3 in the Burglar series by Lawrence Block. So I think I'd read a previous one in the series last week. So this was The Burglar Who Liked to Quote Kipling, which was really fun. So Bernie Rodenbaugh, the burglar of the title, is kind of semi-going straight in this book and has bought a bookshop and is hanging out in the bookshop, but also still doing burglary. So there's loads of like literary references and things like that. This book in particular is about him stealing a lost Kipling book. So it was fun, and the burglar books are just really, really fun. And this one was no exception. So yeah, I had a very good time with that one. After that, I read another Lawrence Block book. So this is one that was originally published in the 60s and had been out of print for 50 years, I think, and then was republished recently by Hardcase Crime. It's called Killing Castro. I think it was originally published as Castro Assassinated or something like that. So as the title suggests, it's about a plot to assassinate Fidel Castro. It features these 5 it's a bit like the Dirty Dozen, basically. There's these 5 American criminals who've all done terrible things, who get kind of pulled together and sent paid $20,000 each, the princely sum of $20,000 each, to go to Cuba and risk their lives in a plot to assassinate Castro. So it was fun. It was a fun read. It was interesting in that you get interspersed with the plot, you get stuff about how Castro came to power, and you feel like Lawrence Block has more sympathy for Castro than the American administration in the 50s and 60s may have. So yeah, it was a fun read. After that, I read book 4 in the Burglar series, so also by Lawrence Block, which was The Burglar Who Studied Spinoza. So again, it was fun. It was not. They're not taxing, the burglar books, but they are quite clever, and the way he kind of knits the plots together is very clever. And this one in particular has a really nice kind of Agatha Christie-esque ending to it, where Bernie Randbar, the burglar, gets kind of all the suspects together and explains how he solved the mystery. So that was very entertaining. After that, I went back to the Witches series and read book 4 in the Witches series. So that was book 4 in the Burglar series to book 4 in the Witches series. So book 4 in the Witches series was The Escape. So this was a really good one. So this had all the kind of sex and violence that is the hallmark of the Witches series, but also had quite a decent plot, and it kind of rounds out the plot of the first 4 books. You kind of take as a whole, which is this battle between Ferris the hero and Monk the evil witchfinder. So it kind of concludes that storyline. After that, I read book 5 in the series, which is The Meeting. So in this one, Ferris travels to America, so travels to the New World, to I think it's Virginia, and kind of sets up life there. But you get witch trials over there as well. So you get him kind of carrying on his kind of adventuring and battles against witchfinders, but now in the States. So that was quite entertaining. So I've only got one more book in this series to read now. I've got book 6. There's 2 more volumes. There's volume 7 and volume 8, but they're really difficult to come by. It's taken me years to build up that collection of the first 6, so I'm keeping my eyes peeled for book 7 and 8. They are books that I would consider breaking my Read What You Own challenge for. I need them. I need to complete that collection so badly that if I did chance across them in the wild, I would probably break my challenge and have to start it again from the beginning. Anyway, so that was book 5 in a series. So I then I then read a book that was kind of out of sequence. So I needed an audio book to listen to while I was exercising. So I listened to Gwendy's Magic Feather by Richard Chizmar. So this is the second in the Gwendy series. So the first is Gwendy's Button Box, which Chizmar co-wrote with Stephen King. So this was okay. I liked Gwendy's Button Box. I didn't like Gwendy's Magic Feather so much. So in the first one, Gwendy, who's the heroine, is like a teenager, and she gets given this button box that kind of gives her magical powers. It's a bit like Button Button, the story by Richard Matheson. So in this one, she's grown up. She's become like a congresswoman or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the term is, but she's made a name for herself, and is kind of financially very stable, and is in politics as well. And she travels back to her hometown for Christmas. So that was quite nice. There was a Christmas theme to it. And there's this series of there's a serial killer operating in the town, and it's kind of about her rediscovering the button box and the kind of the magic that goes with the button box, and also trying to solve this series of killings. But it just felt a bit unnecessary. I didn't really see the point of this book other than to cash in on the success of the first book. So it was fine, but it wasn't great, and it felt like the ending it all wrapped up a bit too neatly and a bit too quickly, in my opinion. Right, back to the series of like reading books that link to each other. So having read book 5 in the Witches series, I then read book 5 in the Doc Savage series. Actually, no, I didn't. I read book 5 in the Burglar series. So that was the burglar who painted like Mondrian. So this one again was really, really fun. In this one, Bernie is hired to steal a painting by Mondrian. And there's loads of stuff. There's some really nice stuff in this book about how all of Mondrian's paintings basically look the same. So there was quite nice humour around that, and around there was a kind of equivalent thing running through the book about various characters looking similar to each other, which ended up being quite key to the plot. So that was another very entertaining one. I've now finished all of the burglar books that I've got. So I've had the first 5. I've read all of those. There is another omnibus. So I'll be reading them in this omnibus, this Kindle omnibus edition, which may be like the best value book I've ever bought. I think I paid £2 for it, and it's got 5 of the burglar books in it, and they're all fantastic. So after that, I moved on to another book 5 in the series. So I read book 5 in the Doc Savage series, which was Brand of the Werewolf. By Kenneth Robeson, or at least that's the name on the cover. Kenneth Robeson was like a house name for the publishers. So this was okay, but it wasn't as much fun as the previous Doc Savage books I've read. So this one has like some relatives of Doc Savage who are getting hassled, and Doc Savage trying to save them from this mysterious gang who use this werewolf symbol. So disappointingly, there was no actual werewolf in this book, and it was much less kind of over the top and silly than some of the previous Doc Savage books have been. So it was okay, but I didn't love it. After that, so continuing the werewolf theme, I read this, Atomic Werewolves and Man-Eating Plants, edited by Robert Deis and Wyatt Doyle, from the Men's Adventure Library series. So this was fantastic. So I talked about this series of books on the channel before. They reprint stories and articles from Men's Adventure magazines from the 50s, 60s and 70s, which were, if I find a cover of one of them, this kind of thing. So kind of trashy adventure type stories for guys with slightly salacious covers. This one collects like weird stories, so kind of horror, sci-fi kind of stories, and was just really, really good fun. So some big names in here. There's an H.P. Lovecraft story. There's a Theodore Sturgeon story, but just really, really entertaining as these books are. There was all sorts in here. So there's vampires, there's werewolves, there's a man-eating plant, clearly. There's like Satanists and things like that. So just a really, really fun read. And just, they're so lovingly put together, these books. They have fantastic like illustrations reprinted from the original magazines and things like that. So they really do a great job of like rediscovering and reprinting these old stories. So had a really, really good time with that one. After that, so continuing the werewolf theme, I read a Goosebumps book, Werewolf Skin by R Stine. This was actually a lot of fun, and like a super quick read because it's like a middle grade book, but really, really entertaining. So this young kid goes to stay with his aunt and uncle in this weird town called Wolf Creek. So if you can imagine what's going on there. And there are, there's like rumours of werewolves and things like that. And it's about him trying to figure out who in the town is a werewolf and who isn't. So it was really fun. I had a couple of good twists in it, a good twist ending. So I enjoyed that one very much. After that, so continuing the theme of children's books, I read a couple of children's books from the 40s and 50s, which will be well known to people in the UK probably, but maybe less well known to people outside the UK. So both by an author called Enid Blyton, who was a very successful children's author over here. So she wrote two very well known, or one very well known and one less well known series of like children's adventure books. The well known one is The Famous Five. The slightly less well known one is The Secret Seven. So these are basically about like gangs of child detectives, a bit like, I guess, in the States, Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, but very, very British. So the first one of these I read Five Go Off to Camp, which was originally published in 1948, and has these there's 4 kids and the dog who makes up the Famous Five, who go and stay near this farm. They're on top of this hill, and running underneath the hill are railway tunnels, and there's something weird going on within the railway tunnels, which they have to investigate. So they talk about these spook trains that are running at night and no one can explain why. So just really, really fun. An interesting cultural artefact, these books, in that they were written just after the Second World War. And this is a mild spoiler, but this one involves like the black market, like the black market in food and things like that existed very much, in England as rationing continued after the Second World War. So yeah, just a fun kids adventure book. I had a really good time with it, and then read one of the Secret Seven books. So it was Secret Seven on the Trail. So this was really interesting, and kind of weirdly and unusually kind of meta and quite playful. So the Secret Seven. One of the members of the Secret Seven, his sister, really wants to be in the Secret Seven, and they won't let her join. So in this book, she sets up her own child detective gang, which she calls the Famous Five, and she says she's calling it the Famous Five because she likes the Famous Five books. So you've got Enid Blyton referring to her own other series in this one, and then the weird thing that happens is so this new Famous Five hold a meeting where they talk about a crime that they've heard about that they're going to investigate, but they've actually completely made it up, and they've made it up because they know the brother who's in the Secret Seven is going to be eavesdropping. He then goes to investigate this crime and discovers that actually there really is a crime going on in the same way they've described. So it was all a bit weird, but really, really fun and very enjoyable. So after that, I read another children's book. So I went back to the Goosebumps series. So I read one of the Horrorland books, which was called Monster Blood for Breakfast, again by R Stine. So I didn't enjoy this one nearly as much as Werewolf Skin. So this is about, I think there's a few Monster Blood books, and Monster Blood is like this weird potion that makes you get much bigger and stronger and stuff like that. And it's about this kid who's a swimmer, swims through his school and gets some of this Monster Blood and gets really good at swimming as a result. And it was okay, but it wasn't fantastic. And then clearly the Horrorland series that this was part of also has this other story tacked on at the end, which I think is part of an ongoing story that features in all of the Horrorland books. So that one made no sense to me at all, because I think this is like book 3 in the series. So yeah, Monster Blood for Breakfast I didn't enjoy nearly as much as Werewolf Skin. Right, the final book then. So after that, using the word monster, I then went back to reading Monster by Naoki Urasawa. So I've finished volume 8, which was really, really entertaining. So I love this series. I'm now reading volume 9, and should finish that today. So that brings me up to date, apart from a couple of things that I am currently reading still. So I'm doing a buddy read with Diane, one of my patrons, of a book called Mary's Monster by Lita Judge. So I started that this week. It's fantastic. So it's a children's book about the life of Mary Shelley, beautifully illustrated and really interesting. I didn't realise quite what an awful life Mary Shelley had had. So really interesting. So I'm about halfway through, and yeah, thoroughly enjoyed that. And then I'm also listening to another audiobook. So listening to A Murder of Quality by John le Carre. So Richard, another one of my patrons, suggested I read this. So my patrons get to suggest books that I might want to read. This is the second of the George Smiley books. And whilst when you think of Smiley and le Carre, you think of kind of spy and espionage fiction. But this one, and indeed the book before it as well. Well, the book before it did have more of an espionage element, because it featured a kind of double agent. But this one is just a pure murder mystery, basically, where Smiley has gone to this public school to investigate the death of the wife of one of the teachers. So it's a really solid and entertaining mystery. Enjoyed that very much, and the audiobook narration is really, really well done on that. So we'll definitely wrap that up this week, and we'll wrap up Mary's Monster as well, and Monster Volume 9, which will finish that series for me. So looking forward to finishing that series, and we'll at some point do a review of that whole series, because it's a great series. So when I finish Monster, I think I've got a few more volumes of manga that I haven't read yet, so I think I'm going to go into those, and then I will see where those take me. Right, so that's the book stuff out of the way. Quickly then, in terms of what's been on the channel, So I've done various top 10 videos in the last week. So top 10 horror books I read this year, top 10 crime books I read this year, and top 10 other books I read this year. And also did the Paxi Awards tag that was created by Andrew from It Came From The Page, which is basically talking about different booktube channels you really like, but very much in honour of our friend Pax Panic, who passed away this year. And then in the week ahead, I'm going to do a mini book haul video. I'm going to do a video looking back at 2023, particularly in terms of how things have gone for the channel and kind of standout books that I've read. And then also going to do a January TBR video. And then for Christmas Day, I've got a very special video. I haven't done anything like this ever before on the channel. I've just finished filming it. It took me a long time to film it, which is why I'm a bit croaky. So yes, hopefully you will enjoy that on Christmas Day. It's kind of a Christmas treat, but I'm not going to say any more than that. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for now. Do let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about. Let me know what you've been reading this week. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.